Imagine you have just taken the throne after the time of troubles. The country is poor, the people are angry, the treasury is empty, and you cannot appear weak. In your hands are the laws, taxes, and the right to appoint the guilty. And suddenly, strange figures emerge from the war. For 20 years of slaughter, it's not just the treasury that pays. One merchant's name keeps appearing in the documents, as if the war is someone's business project. This is dangerous for you personally. Those who pay start to demand returns, and then the state becomes collateral. One of your decrees, and you call it patriotic service, while those who ask, "What did we get in return?" are declared enemies of order. What will you choose? To leave the war as a state affair, or to silently sign a deal where the blood of the army is exchanged for monopolies and territory for private owners? Now, let's look at how this played out in real history. Open any map of Europe after 1721. Place it in front of you. The Northern War is over. 21 years of continuous bloodshed. 21. Reflect on this number. A whole generation of people lived their lives only in a state of war. Born in war, grew up in war, perished in war. Russia is officially declared the victor. Sweden is defeated. Charles XII fled to the Turks. The Swedish army was crushed near Poltava. The fleet was burned on the Finnish shores. It seemed like a triumph. But look more closely at what Russia has gained over these 2 decades of blood. Run your finger along the map by the new border. A narrow strip of Baltic marshes from Vyborg to Riga. Several ruined fortresses with shattered walls. Ingermanland, a land where water stands on the surface all year round. And the desolate shore of the Gulf of Finland, blown through by northern winds. It is here that a new capital will be built, on bones, literally. 100,000 serfs will perish, hauling logs through the swamps and driving piles into the soft soil. Calculate the value of the acquisition. From an economic point of view, this is a loss-making territory. The swamps cannot be drained. The forest grows poorly and gnarled. Fishing is meager. There are not enough peasants. They have all been taken into the army or to construction. There are no trade routes. They still need to be laid out. And maintaining a new capital will require an army of stonemasons who will have to be brought from Europe because there are simply not enough masters in the needed quantity. 20 years for land that brings only losses. This is not how wars are fought. Lives of an entire generation are not paid for such acquisitions. This looks not like a victory of the state, but like a completed task. Someone ordered a specific result, and the result has been achieved. It doesn't matter at what cost. Now look at what happened in Sweden itself. Open the genealogy of the Swedish kings. After the war, the royal dynasty of Vasa, which ruled the country since 1523, is rapidly losing power. Over a century on the throne. Gustav Vasa, Eric XIV, Charles IX, Gustav Adolf, names that entered the history of Europe. A dynasty that turned Sweden into a great power. And suddenly, immediately after the Northern War, it disappears. Representatives of the German House of Holstein-Gottorp ascend to the throne. German, not Swedish. In 1751, Adolf Frederick becomes king. Where is he from? From a small northern German duchy. What was he doing in Sweden? Nothing, until he received the crown. Coincidence? Dynasties do not change by chance after wars. They are changed purposefully. Look at the beneficiaries. The German principalities significantly strengthened their positions after the Northern War. Hanover receives the British crown in 1714. Prussia becomes a kingdom in 1701, exactly in the year the war ends. Saxony controls Poland through a personal union. Holstein-Gottorp takes Sweden. Even in Russia itself, Peter's wife, the future Catherine I, is from the Baltic Germans, and their daughter marries the Duke of Holstein-Gottorp, and from this marriage Peter III is born, the future Russian emperor. Do you see the pattern? Germany is everywhere. After the war, which Russia waged with the blood of others, someone needed not the territory of swamps. Someone needed a change of power across Northern Europe. Russia was given the role of a battering ram, an expensive battering ram, a bloody one, but effective. You strike Sweden, you get a German king on its throne. A perfect deal, just not for those who are the battering ram. You will be told, Russia gained access to the sea, became a European power, built a fleet. Okay, then answer one question. Who built this fleet? Open the lists of shipbuilders. The Admiralty shipyards of St. Petersburg were designed by German engineers. The ships were drawn by the Dutch. The cannons were cast by Swedish foundry workers, the same ones with whom they had just fought. The Russian fleet was built by Europe, with Russian money, for European purposes. And this is where things get really interesting. War costs money, a lot. 21 years of maintaining an army of 150,000. Salaries, gunpowder, lead, iron for cannonballs, building fortresses. Just the Kronstadt fortress, 2 million rubles. Manufacturing muskets and cannons. Uniforms for each soldier every 2 years. Provisions, forage for the cavalry, transportation. At least 15 million rubles over all the years. A huge amount for a ruined country. The treasury is empty after Azov. The Tsar is introducing taxes one after another on beards, coffins, baths, beehives, pipes. The peasants are destitute. 3 years of poor harvests in a row. Famine. There is no industry. Factories are only being built. Where is the money for 2 decades of war? Historians mention one surname, Stroganovs, a merchant dynasty. It was they who financed the Northern War. A private corporation. Merchants pay for the empire's war directly, with money, with goods, with metal from factories, with provisions from warehouses, as if the war is their business project. He who pays orders the music. You will be told, patriots helped their homeland in a difficult time, sacrificing their fortune for the common cause. Noble patrons. Then explain what the Stroganovs received in return. Open the documents after the war. Their possessions increased many times over. Before the war, they had salt works in the Perm region and several factories in the Urals. After the war, all of Siberia essentially becomes their fiefdom. All of it, from the Urals to the Pacific Ocean. A monopoly on the extraction and sale of furs. A monopoly on salt. A monopoly on metallurgy. They received the right to maintain their own troops for the protection of their possessions. The right to administer justice over the population on their lands. And the most incredible thing, the right to mint their own coin. Stop for a second. Minting a coin. This is an exclusive privilege of the state, a sovereign right, a symbol of power. And here the merchants receive stamps and begin to print their own rubles. There was even the emblem of the Stroganovs on the coins. They are turning into a state within a state. That can't happen. What is such generosity for? For financing the war? No. For the fact that they ordered this war. The war was their business project, an investment in future profits. They invested 15 million. They gained control over territories that bring millions annually. An ideal deal. Just not for Russia. Look further. A long time ago, in the 16th century, the same Stroganovs financed Yermak, the campaign in Siberia, the conquest of new territories. Officially for the Tsar, in fact for themselves. The scheme worked for centuries. They found a manageable ruler, gave him an army and money, sent him to war, took the trophies. Peter was not the first, and not the last. But for this scheme to work, an army is needed. Moreover, not an ordinary one, a manageable one, loyal not to the Tsar, but to those who pay. And here we come to the main question. In what language were commands given in this army? A simple question. It would seem that in the Russian army, commands should be in Russian. But open the lists of the command staff of Peter's regiments. Just read the last names aloud. The Preobrazhensky Regiment. General Avtamon Golovin is listed formally, but his deputies are all foreigners. Johann Butenant von Rosenbusch, Johann German Weid, Franz Wilbua. The Semenovsky Regiment is commanded by Johann von Mengden. The Butirsky Regiment, Patrick Gordon, a Scot, who even spoke Russian with a terrible accent. The Lefortovsky Regiment, as per its name, Franz Lefort, a Swiss from Geneva. The artillery is commanded by Yakov Vilimovich de Grand, a Frenchman. The cavalry is led by Ludwig Nicholas Allard, a Dutchman. The engineering troops are overseen by William Adam Kirch, a Scotsman. The dragoons are commanded by Renzel von Delden, a German. Even the Tsar's chief physician is a Dutchman, Nicholas Bidloo. Foreign surgeons, foreign quartermasters, foreign wagon masters. Count the Russian surnames in this list. Take any regimental composition. 2%. The rest are mercenaries, foreigners, strangers. This does not resemble the Russian army. It looks more like a European expeditionary corps rented by Russia. Moreover, it was rented not for the protection of its own borders, but for specific military operations beyond the country. A mercenary army. Only it was not the state that hired it. It was done by those who paid. And it was not Russian generals who commanded it. It was the masters, Europeans. You will be told, European experience was needed. There was a shortage of military specialists. Teachers were invited from abroad. Well, a reasonable argument. Then explain why in 50 years, when all this experience has been passed on, the commanders are still foreigners. Why, under Elizabeth Petrovna, daughter of Peter, who ruled from 1741 to 1761, are the army commanders still the same Germans? Munich, Lacy, Levenvold. Why, under Catherine II, another 20 years later, does the commander-in-chief become Rumyantsev, a Russian surname, but his deputies are again Germans and Scots? Because it was not a Russian army. These were regiments of foreign formation. Even officially, this was how it was referred to in the documents. Foreign, alien, not ours. foreign. The statutes were written in German, initially. Then they were translated into Russian, often poorly. Military terms were left untranslated. Soldiers learned commands in German: halt, march, fire, left, right, to the right, to the left, stop, go. Everything in German. Soldiers marched according to Prussian drill techniques. The uniforms were tailored according to European models: red coats like those of the English infantry, tricorn hats like those of the Prussians, boots, ties, sashes, everything copied. Even the banners were copied from the Swedish and German. Look at the banners of the Preobrazhensky Regiment, the double-headed eagle. Good. A Russian symbol. But the arrangement, colors, and design, all according to European heraldic canons. The only Russian thing in these regiments is the blood that the ordinary soldiers shed. Russian men from the villages, gathered by recruitment drives. Everything else was imported. Commanders, regulations, uniforms, weapons, tactics. But if the army is foreign in composition, foreign in language, foreign in spirit, then where did it come from at all? Who created it? The official history tells a fairy tale about the amusing troops, a sweet children's story. Little Petrusha played with toy soldiers, and his father Tsar Alexei Mikhailovich gave him several dozen serf boys for entertainment. The boy grew, and the toy soldiers increased in number. By the age of majority, 2 regiments had been formed. The Preobrazhensky, from the village of Preobrazhenskoy, the Semenovsky, from the village of Semenovskoy. A beautiful legend for children's books. But the father of Peter, Tsar Alexei Mikhailovich, passed away on January 29, 1676, when little Peter was 3 years and 8 months old. 3 years, 8 months. At this age, children barely speak in coherent sentences. What military games? What regiments? Who commanded these mock troops for the next 14 years while Peter was growing? Who fed them? Who paid their salaries? Who procured weapons? Who built the barracks? Where did the officer instructors come from? Historians sidestep these questions. They are uncomfortable, because there are no answers. There is only one absurd version, that the regent princess Sophia allowed her brother to play at war, just as long as he did not interfere with her rule. Absurd. Count the timelines accurately. From the 27th of April, 1682, when Sophia became regent after the Streltsy Rebellion, to August 1689, when she was overthrown. 7 years. 7. The Streltsy are completely on her side. 12 regiments of experienced, armed, loyal warriors. She controls Moscow. She controls the treasury. She controls appointments to all positions. And during this time, right under her nose, in the villages of Preobrazhenskoy and Semyonovskoy, located an hour's walk from the Kremlin, someone is secretly creating 2 full-fledged regular military units. He teaches them European drill techniques. He arms them with Dutch muskets of the model of 1680. He purchases cannons. He builds squares for training. He erects barracks. He organizes warehouses with gunpowder and lead. He hires foreign instructors. He pays salaries. He feeds. He clothes. He supplies. And all this unnoticed by the authorities, who are an hour's walk away. 7 years. 2 guards. Fully equipped. Trained. Ready for battle. Impossible. It is technically, logistically, economically impossible. Try to gather at least 500 people today in modern conditions. Find a venue for them. Feed them 3 times a day. Find weapons, even if they are training ones. Arrange for supplies. Hire instructors. organized training in drill techniques, physical training, shooting, tactics. This requires colossal logistics. Dozens of tons of products every month. Warehouse space, transport, workshops for equipment repair, forgeries, money for wages, connections with suppliers, documents for transporting goods, permits from authorities. And all this went unnoticed by the government within an hour's walk? Impossible. Sophia either knew and kept silent, or these regiments were not created for Peter. They were created for someone else. And when the time came, they were simply handed over to Peter. Ready, trained, staffed with foreign officers, with supplies, with weapons, with regulations, with traditions. Handed over as a tool for carrying out a task. Look at the biography of Peter himself. He is the 14th child of Tsar Alexei Mikhailovich. If we do not count the daughters, he is the 6th son. Count how many people stood between him and the throne. The older brother Alexei was the heir. He passed away at the age of 16. Suddenly. The next, Fyodor, ruled for 6 years and passed away at 20, without children. Next is Ivan, Peter's older brother. He is almost 16, the age of majority by the standards of that time, but he is declared feeble-minded, lame, blind, incapable of ruling. Although later he marries peacefully, and he has 5 daughters, one of whom will become Empress Anna Ioannovna. 5 brothers. All of them perished in due time, or they were declared unfit precisely when they hindered Peter. You will be told child mortality in those times was high, nothing surprising. Then explain why peasant children in the villages survived more often than royal offspring in the Kremlin. There were better doctors there, better food, warm chambers. Yet the Tsarevich died one after another. But not all. Only those who stood in the way. This is not a coincidence. This is selection. Why? For what purpose? The answer becomes clear when looking at Peter's first military operation. Azov, 1695 to 1696. 2 campaigns against the Turkish fortress at the mouth of the Don. Officially, this is called the beginning of the Russo-Turkish War. But this is a lie. During these same years, the Great Turkish War is ongoing, a coalition of European powers against the Ottoman Empire, the Holy League. Look at its composition. The Holy Roman Empire, the Venetian Republic, the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, the Order of Malta, and Russia. How did the Orthodox Kingdom end up in the Catholic League? Who included Moscow in this alliance? By whose order did the Russian army go against the Turks? Not by the decision of the Boyar Duma, not at the will of the Patriarch. Someone from above gave the command, and Peter executed it. Azov was not a war. It was a test, a check of the tool's readiness. Would the young Tsar manage the army? Would the soldiers go into battle? Could the foreign commanders maintain discipline? Azov was taken on the 2nd attempt. The exam was passed. The tool is operational. Immediately after Azov, the Turks cease to be enemies. The Swedes take their place. But first, Peter is sent to Europe. The Grand Embassy, 1697 to 1698. Officially, the Tsar goes to learn shipbuilding. He works as a simple carpenter at the shipyards of Holland and England. He stands at the workbench. He planes boards. He drives nails. The Tsar, the autocrat. He transforms into a worker. Why? The Tsar does not need to know how to build a ship. He needs to know whom to order to do it. The Tsar does not need to be able to work with an axe. He has thousands of carpenters for that. Peter did not study in Europe. He received instructions. Who to fight, where to direct the army, which territories to clear, whom to place on the vacant thrones. The Great Embassy is not an educational trip. It is an internship for the executor before the main task. The schedule speaks for itself. Azov is a test. Europe is a briefing. The Northern War is the execution of the task. But while Peter is in Europe, something strange is happening in Moscow. The Streltsy Rebellion. The year 1698. The Streltsy rise up in revolt, officially against the foreign Germans. In fact, against the new army which is being prepared to replace them. The rebellion is suppressed. By whom? The Preobrazhensky Regiment, the Semyonovsky Regiment, the Butirsky Regiment, the Lefortovo Regiment. The same toy soldiers who can no longer be called toy soldiers. All the commanders are foreigners. Patrick Gordon, Franz Lefort, Johann von Mengden, Ludwig Allard. They crush the Streltsy. Quickly, brutally, professionally. Peter returns from Europe in August 1698. An investigation begins. Interrogations, torture, extraction of testimonies. The Tsar personally witnesses the executions. 2,000 Streltsy are sentenced. They are hanged in the squares of Moscow, on poles, on gallows at the walls of the Kremlin. Some are subjected to the wheel, others are quartered. The bodies hang for 5 months. 5. From September to February. Through autumn, winter, in frost and snow. This is not an execution by law. This is a lesson. This is a public demonstration of power. This is intimidation. The old army is physically destroyed. In its place comes a new one. Controlled. Foreign. Loyal not to the Tsar, but to those who pay and command. You will be told, the rebels were punished according to the law of wartime. The traitors were punished justly. Good. Then explain why the execution turned into a spectacle for 6 months. Why not simply execute and bury, as is customary according to Christian traditions? Why were the corpses displayed publicly, like a scarecrow in a field? Why did the Tsar order the bodies to be hung near monasteries, near churches, at the gates of the Kremlin, so that every passerby could see, so that fear would enter the hearts, so that no one would dare to remember the old ways again? Because they were not just removing rebels, they were removing witnesses. The shooters had seen too much. They had served back in the time of Tsar Alexei Mikhailovich. They remembered the times before Sofia. They knew what the world looked like before the coup. They saw what was hidden behind the official history. Their grandfathers and fathers had been in the shooting regiments under Tsar Mikhail Fyodorovich, the first Romanov. It was a hereditary service. Knowledge was passed down. Traditions were preserved. And most importantly, their uniform. Their symbolism revealed an affiliation with a completely different system. Look closely at the banners of the arquebusier regiments. Do not hesitate to find images in museums or archives. What do you see? Crosses. 8 pointed crosses. Maltese crosses. The same ones as on the banners of the French musketeers. Absolutely identical symbolism. The same geometric design, the same proportions, the same arrangement. Red crosses on a white background, or white on red. Moreover, this is not a random coincidence. This is a standard, a single heraldic code. The same symbolism, the same time of appearance. The Strzelecki regiments were created in the 16th century, the musketeers as well. The same armament, muskets with matchlock, sabers, pikes, halberds for the strelci, halberds for the musketeers, variations of one weapon. The same battle tactics, the same organization into regiments. Even the names are similar. Strelci, from the word to shoot, musketeers, from musket. Both terms refer to warriors with firearms. Strelci are Russian musketeers, part of a single global army that existed before the world was divided into modern states with their borders and flags. Remember the novel by Alexandre Dumas, The Three Musketeers? A classic of literature. The musketeers of King Louis XIII against the guards of Cardinal Richelieu. Two armies in one country. Formally, both serve France. In fact, they are hostile to each other. They fight in duels. They set ambushes. They struggle for influence. In Dumas' story, the musketeers win. The noble D'Artagnan, Athos, Porthos, Aramis remain heroes. The cardinal dies. The king triumphs. A beautiful tale with a happy ending. But this is fiction. In real history, everything is the opposite. The cardinal's guards won. In France, the musketeers were disbanded by the end of the 17th century. In Russia, the strelci were executed in 1698. Throughout Europe, similar units with similar symbolism disappeared around the same time. The old guard was replaced by a new one. Docile, foreign, unified. One scenario, different countries. This was not a local uprising. This was a global revolution. A cleanup of the remnants of the old system of governance. What system? The one that controlled the trade routes from east to west. The Silk Road. The Amber Road. Waterways through the Baltic ports. Key transport hubs. Fortresses at strategic points. The archers were the military force guarding this system of trade and exchange. The jesters came to destroy it, to replace it with a new order, new masters, new rules. The Northern War began exactly 2 years after the mass executions of the strelci. 1700. August. Russia, in alliance with Denmark, Saxony, and Poland, attacks Sweden. The official version? The struggle for access to the Baltic. The return of historically Russian lands taken by the Swedes. Beautiful words. Patriotic rhetoric. But look at the map of the theater of operations more closely. Narva, Riga, Revel, Viborg, Kexholm. This is not just cities with fortresses. These are nodes of an ancient trade network, ports through which flows of goods have been coming for centuries. Furs from Siberia, grain from the southern steppes, timber from the Russian north, metals from the Urals, amber from the Baltic shores. Sweden controlled the Baltic for more than a century, since the end of the 30 Years' War in 1648. The entire Baltic basin was a Swedish lake, which means Sweden controlled the connection between East and West, controlled the flow of goods, controlled money, controlled information. Who was bothered by this? Who needed this severed connection? Think about it. 7 countries against one small Sweden. Russia, Denmark, Saxony, Poland. Later, Prussia and Hanover will join the alliance. 7 against 1. This is not a war of equal powers. This is not a struggle for balance in Europe. This is a cleanup, a targeted destruction of a state that held the key to the Baltic. Sweden did not just lose territories and reparations. It lost the status of a great power. It lost population. Almost a third of it was lost during the war. It lost the economy. The devastation was total. And it lost the dynasty. After the Northern War, the kings from the ancient Vasa dynasty, who had ruled since 1523, disappear from the political arena. The Holstein Gottorps rise to the throne, a German branch from a small northern German duchy. And not by chance. This happens synchronously with the strengthening of German principalities throughout Europe. Hanover receives the British crown in 1714. The House of Hanover will occupy the English throne. Saxony controls Poland through a personal union of Elector Augustus the Strong. Prussia becomes a kingdom in 1701, exactly at the year the Northern War begins. The Brandenburg Prussian state transforms from a duchy into a kingdom, and Russia, after 20 years of war, gains the swamps of Ingermanland and destroyed fortresses. The reward is completely disproportionate to the efforts expended, because Russia is not the initiator of the war. Russia is the executor, a hired army, heavy infantry for foreign strategic purposes. Who is the real client? Who coordinated all these wars, coups, and changes of dynasties? Go back to the very beginning, to the Holy League against the Turks. Who created it? Open the documents. Pope Innocent XI established the Holy League in 1684. The goal was to expel the Ottomans from Europe. The composition of the alliance is impressive. The Holy Roman Empire led by the Habsburgs, the Venetian Republic, the Commonwealth, the Russian Tsardom, and a special point in the documents, the Knights of Malta, a sovereign military monastic order of the Johannites, formally subordinate to the Pope. Actually, a completely autonomous structure, owning its own fleet of galleys and sailing ships, owning fortresses in Malta, Rhodes, and various ports of the Mediterranean, owning banks and financial assets throughout Europe. Hospitallers, Johannites, Maltese Knights. There are many names, but the essence is the same. The order did not disappear after the Crusades in the 14th century. It did not dissolve into history. It transformed. It evolved. From protectors of pilgrims and the sick, it turned into coordinators of European politics, into puppeteers pulling the strings of monarchs. The order does not fight itself. It does not have huge armies, but it provides money. It provides commanders. It provides instructions. It provides coordination. Countries fight each other on the battlefield, shed blood, and lose people. And the order sits in the shadows and directs the process. Directs it so that after the war the map of Europe changes in the needed way, so that some dynasties fall, others rise, so that trade routes come under the control of the right people, so that financial streams flow in to the right banks. You will be told, just the symbolism of the era, a religious tradition, a tribute to the Crusaders, a coincidence. Then explain one simple thing. Why does Orthodox Russia, the country of Eastern Christianity, bear on the banners of its regiments the symbols of a Catholic knightly order? Why are Maltese crosses depicted on the flags of the Preobrazhensky, Semyonovsky, and Butirsky regiments? Why, after Peter, during his grandson Paul I in 1798, does the Maltese order officially establish itself in Russia? Why does the Russian emperor become the grand master of this Catholic order? An Orthodox king, head of a Catholic organization. Absurd? No. Logic. Russia pays off debts, returning what it took, acknowledging the true masters. Because it is not a symbol of a religious tradition. It is a mark of belonging, a sign of subordination, a stamp of ownership on one's property. Russia of the 18th century, a mercenary army of the Maltese order. Money comes from the Stroganov Corporation, linked to the financial networks of the order. Foreign officers command, having been educated in European military schools under the control of the same structures. Symbols are worn by others. Maltese crosses on the banners. They wage wars on foreign orders. First the Turks, then the Swedes, then whoever commands. The scheme functions flawlessly for centuries. Look at the operation as a whole. 7 steps. A proven technology. First, they cleared the field. Alexei was gone at 16, suspiciously young for an heir to the throne. Fyodor ruled for 6 years and left at 20, also too early. Ivan was declared unfit to rule, although he later married without issue and left 5 daughters. 3 brothers were removed from the path in 10 years, a statistically incredible series. Only Peter remains, the 14th child, the 6th son, but the only available one. Young, energetic, receptive to foreign influence. Then they built the instrument. For 7 years under Sophia, someone created 2 guards a mile away from the Kremlin. Not toy detachments, but real combat units, with European officers, with imported muskets, with cannons in the warehouses, with barracks and squares. Everything is ready. Everything is staffed. It only remains to hand it over to Peter when he grows up. Next is the purge of old personnel. The musketeers are rebelling in 1698. They are crushed by the new regiments. 2,000 are executed. The corpses hang on display for 5 months. This is not justice. This is a demonstration of power. The old guard is publicly eliminated. The new one has taken its place. Now, in the army, there are only those trained by Europeans and loyal to those who pay their salaries. Then a battle check. The Azov campaigns of 1695. The young Tsar leads the troops to the Turkish fortress. The first time he fails. He learns from the mistakes. The second time he takes it. The exam is passed. The instrument functions. The soldiers obey. The foreign commanders maintain discipline. It is time to move on to the main task. But first, a briefing. The Great Embassy of 1697. Peter is leaving for Europe allegedly to study shipbuilding. 18 months abroad. Meetings with kings, electors, financiers. The Tsar stands at the workbench and planes boards at Dutch shipyards. A beautiful picture for history. But what happens behind closed doors during negotiations? What instructions does he receive? Who to fight next? Where to strike? When to start? None of this is recorded in the official protocols. But the schedule of further actions speaks for itself. Return. The executions of the Streltsy. And exactly 2 years later, the Northern War. The year 1700. Poltava. Narva. The assaults on Riga, Revel, Vyborg. Naval battles at Ganget and Gringam. Everything according to the plan obtained in Europe. Sweden loses its status as a great power forever. The Baltic comes under new control. The final stage is consolidation. After the war, the map of Europe is redrawn. Holstein-Gottorps in Sweden, Hanoverians in England, Saxons in Poland. Russia remains with swamps and debts. Meanwhile, German princes receive crowns in 3 states. Stroganovs hold monopolies from the Urals to the Pacific Ocean. The Maltese order controls the nodes of Baltic trade. Everyone is satisfied, except for the dead. Calculate the cost. Only those killed in battles, 130,000 soldiers by conservative estimates of historians. Add those who died from wounds, diseases, and starvation on the campaigns, at least another 70,000. In total, around 200,000 lives, plus 100,000 serfs in the construction of Petersburg. 300,000 people over 20 years, men aged 16 to 40, torn away from families by conscription, trained to hold a musket and stand in ranks under canister fire, thrown into a foreign war. They did not understand what they were dying for. They were told, for the Tsar, for faith, for the homeland. Standard slogans. But in fact, Russian blood was paying for the European redistribution. Every fallen soldier worked for someone else's result. The deal was made. Russia was expendable material. Not a buyer, not a client. Material. This is not a conspiracy theorist's fantasy. This is a chain of facts laid out in chronological order. Foreign commanders are a fact. There are lists of regimental composition in the archives from 1700 to 1720. Of the 237 generals and colonels, 193 are foreigners, 82% of the command staff. The financing by the Stroganovs is a fact. Payment statements have survived where the merchant family covers the expenses for the maintenance of the Semyonovsky regiment entirely. The change of dynasty in Sweden is a fact. The House of Vasa ruled from 1523 to 1720. The House of Holstein-Gottorp came immediately after. The dates are in any textbook. The symbolism of the Order of Malta on Russian banners is a fact. The Museum of Artillery in St. Petersburg holds the flags of the Preobrazhensky Regiment with 8-pointed crosses. Paul I as a Grand Master is a fact. The title is official, confirmed by a decree dated December 6, 1798. The synchronicity of the disbandment of the Streltsy and Musketeers is a fact. France disbands the Musketeer Company in 1675, restores it in 1684, and finally disbands it in 1705. Russia executes the Streltsy en masse in 1698. The difference is 10 years, but the vector is the same. Explain all this as a chain of coincidences. Try to piece together in your mind a picture where Russia fought for itself, of its own volition, for its own goals. It won't work. Too many inconsistencies. 82% of foreign commanders is not a lack of personnel. It is a conscious choice. Financing the war by the private Stroganov Company is not patriotism. It is an investment expecting profit. The change of dynasty in defeated Sweden to a German branch is not a coincidence. It is the goal of the operation. 18th century Russia was fulfilling someone else's order. Its army fought on its own soil, but according to someone else's plan. Its soldiers shed their blood, but for someone else's benefit. Its czars bore the titles of autocrats, but received instructions from abroad. And the most horrifying thing is that the mechanism continued to operate after Peter. Catherine II, German Princess Sophia Frederica of Anhalt-Zerbst on the Russian throne. Paul I, official Grand Master of the Maltese Order. Alexander I, ally of the same forces against Napoleon, who tried to break the system. Nicholas I, suppressor of the revolutions of 1848 by order of Europe. The dynasty from Peter to Nicholas II, continuation of one scheme. The enemies changed: Turks, Swedes, French, their own people, but the technology remained unchanged. To reap the benefits through the hands of others, to finance both sides of the conflict, to take the profits, to leave the executors with debts and graves. A classic scheme. Nothing personal, just business, just a big game. And in schools, they still teach Peter the Great modernized Russia, cut a window to Europe, created an empire. Maybe. But whose empire did it become? For whom did this window open? For Russian goods or European influence? And who looks through it from that side, pulling the strings through proxies, financiers, and commanders in foreign uniforms? Answers turn a history of victories into a history of usage. They turn a reformer into a managed executor. They turn a great country into expendable material for foreign purposes. An unpleasant truth, painful, but based on facts and dates. One just needs to take off the blinders and look with the sober gaze of an engineer. Then the scheme becomes apparent. The mechanism is clearly visible. And it becomes clear, we live in a world created by that system. States are figures on the board. Players are in the shadows, moving the pieces towards their goals. Subscribe to the channel. Don't forget to click the bell so you don't miss new investigations. There are many more mysteries and discoveries ahead. We will continue to look for evidence, ask uncomfortable questions, explore what official science overlooks. Because the truth is always nearby. You just have to want to see it.